Okay, so we're comparing asexual reproduction. Think what that word there means. Asexual means without sex. Sexual means with sex. In other words, that sexual reproduction requires two parents, a female and a male, whereas asexual reproduction only requires one parent. Okay, so when we're talking about asexual reproduction, we're talking about the individuals, the new individuals, as producing clones of each other. They're going to be genetically identical. So an example of an organism that reproduces asexually that we've heard of would be bacteria. And we know that what do bacteria do? One bacteria copies itself and becomes two identical bacteria, like that. So remember, a bacteria is a single cell. And when this bacterial cell undergoes cell division, it makes copies of itself that are identical to the parent. So we'd say this is the parent, if you like, and these are the offspring, and they are going to be exactly the same. Clones, we know that word. And maybe we remember from early biology topics that this type of cell division, where you get an exact copy, is called mitosis. Okay? So there's no swapping of genetic information here. Yeah, there's no mixing of genes. There are no gametes. And when we say gametes, remember, we mean sex cells. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And cell division here, these organisms only ever do mitosis. Okay, we're going to come back to explaining the cell division again in a minute. Most animals and plants that you think of reproduce sexually. They have males and females, and they have gametes that have to fuse, they have to join together when fertilization happens. So if you are an animal, like we are, our gametes are sperm cells and egg cells. And if you are a plant, then your gametes are pollen cells and ovules or eggs as well. Okay? Sperm and pollen represent male gametes, and egg and ovules female gametes. So because you've got gametes, during sexual reproduction, you get a mixing of genes, and of course that will lead to variation within a set of individuals. Whereas when there's no mixing of genes, that leads to genetically identical individuals, clones. Okay? To get your gametes, you have to have another type of cell division, which is meiosis, which might be new for some people. So meiosis is for making gametes. And then sexually reproduce, we also do mitosis at the same time, but for us, mitosis is about growing and getting bigger. So in sexually reproducing organisms, there are separate males and females, separate male and female cells, we call gametes. And so we can say pretty much all animals and most plants can reproduce sexually. They have two parents and their offspring are similar but not the same. There is variation between them. some images showing different gametes. So this diagram here, this one, which is showing a sperm fertilizing an egg. Notice how big the egg is compared to the sperm cell, even though both of them are single cells. And here we've got an electron microscope picture as well, just of some sperm cells on the surface of an egg. Okay, and again you can see the size difference, and notice the scale bar here, 10 micrometers. A micrometer is a millionth of a meter. So these sperm are this length here, this scale bar is 10 times 10 to the minus 6 meters. That's 10 micrometers. So in biology, in the early topics, we talked about magnification. Both of these images are taken with an electron microscope. The electron microscope has a very high resolution and a much better magnification, so you can see very small things in more detail. And then this diagram here is showing a drawing of a sperm cell. Okay, so we'd know that this sperm cell, in real life, looking at this scale here, is probably about what, 10, 20, 30 millionths of a meter long. Okay, and looking in detail at the sperm cell, so remember this is a male gamete sperm cell for animals, tail to swim, we should know that. A head containing a nucleus, and this important fact for this topic here, that nucleus has got half the genetic information in it. Half of your genes came from your dad in one of his sperm cells, and those genes were inside the nucleus in the head of that sperm cell. This acrosome is a layer around the head which contains chemicals that can allow the sperm to penetrate through the membrane of the egg cell. So remember the job of the sperm, it's adapted, it's specialized to swim through the cervix, up through the uterus, into the fallopian tubes, where it can meet an egg cell, and only one of the sperm that make it there will be able to deliver their nucleus and fertilize the egg. To do that, the sperm needs loads of energy. So in this part here, if we looked under an electron microscope, we'd see that this part is packed with mitochondria. And those mitochondria, remember, are the site in the cell where aerobic respiration is happening. So if a cell has got lots of mitochondria, it needs to do lots of aerobic respiration, and the point of respiration is to deliver energy, and obviously the energy in the sperm cell is required for it to be able to swim such a long way compared to its size. Okay, so sexually reproducing animals, sperm cells, egg cells, and the sperm's job is to deliver its chromosomes, its genes, which will be half a set, and they need to join with the half a set which are in the nucleus of the egg cell. Okay, scrolling down a bit, the next set of pictures I put here are linking this to plants. So here you've got some pollen grains from different plants. They're all different shapes and sizes. In fact, every plant makes a specific shape pollen grain. We can identify plants from the shape of their pollen grains, and you can see that they've got lumps and bumps and sticky out bits. Some of them, like pine pollen, have little air sacs so they can fly around on the air better. All right, lots of specializations again, but pollen is the equivalent of a sperm cell. Okay, all of the things. It's male, it's got half the chromosomes, half of the genes from an organism, and it's going to need to get to the egg cells in a plant, which are down here in the plant's ovary. So flowers are the sex organs of plants. The stamen is the male part, and pollen grains are produced on the anthers of the stamen. So this covered in pollen. When you look into a flower and you see all that yellow dusty stuff, okay, especially something like a lily, right, that's the pollen which is on the anthers. Some florists will cut them out because it stains your clothes if you get it on your clothes. For the plant to reproduce, pollen from a different individual but the same type of plant needs to be delivered either by an insect or the wind, and the pollen grains are going to basically then do what a sperm cell does, just in a slightly different way. They're going to grow a tube. Let's change colour so we can see better. They're going to grow a tube from where they land on the sticky stigma, grow a tube into the ovary and deliver their nucleus so it can join with a plant's ovule, a plant's egg cell. Okay, so this stigma, style and ovary is the female part of the flower, and the stamen is the male part. Now plants could fertilize themselves, okay, because they've got both parts, but they tend to be adapted so that pollen from the same type of plant but a different individual is going to be delivering its DNA to this individual's egg cells, and that's better for the plant because variation is a good thing in terms of being adapted to your environment. Okay, so there's our sexually reproducing plants and animals, and here I've put some diagrams of bacterial cells. Okay, remember from cell biology that we know bacterial cells are different. They're a complete different group, and we call these prokaryotic cells. They're not animals and they're not plants, but they have some features of both. Much, much smaller. Look at the scale bar here. 1 micrometer. Okay? 1 micrometer, a millionth of a meter. So these cells here are about half a micrometer across. This is one type of bacterial cell. This is another type. Look, different shape. These bacteria have got flagella. They're going to be moving around. There's lots and lots of different types of bacteria. Some of them make us ill. Some of them are useful and good for us. Okay? But all of them are individual, single, prokaryotic cells that reproduce asexually just by copying and splitting in half. Right, and this final diagram here, this one, the image here, this is just showing the magnification of an electron microscope. This thing that looks like the top of a mountain is actually the tip of a pin, magnified. Doesn't look so sharp when it's magnified, and you can see how rough it is on a microscopic scale. And these clusters of yellow are bacterial cells. Okay, so you get an idea of scale, okay, where very, very small cells compared to animal and especially plant cells. Right, remember earlier we said human egg cells are very large. They're the biggest cell in your body, well, if you're female, and they are, you could probably see one with the naked eye just about the size of a full stop on a page, maybe. Okay, and then here you've got a diagram trying to show you how much smaller the bacterial cells are. They're sitting on the tip of a pin. If you poke this pin into you, some of these bacteria might infect your skin and it might go sore and infected, a bit pussy, as your white blood cells fight them. All right, so let's go back to our table. We should be happy with this comparison here that asexual reproduction literally just means copying yourself, for example bacteria, and that copying, cloning, is effectively mitosis, which is where cells make exact copies or clones of themselves, compared to sexual reproduction, where you have a male and a female cells called gametes. Here's the word. Gametes contain half a set of chromosomes, DNA, which leads to variation, so explains why you might look similar to your parents, or you might look similar to your brothers or sisters, but show some differences. And we're going to look in more detail now at how animals and plants use meiosis to form sex cells. Let's look at these key words here. In males, in boys, and in females, girls, your body cells have a full set of your chromosomes. We say they are diploid. Okay? And we reference that in these genetics topics as 2n, where n is the number of chromosomes in a gamete, and so in every single cell in your body, apart from your gametes, you are diploid. 2n, pairs of chromosomes. Our diploid number is 46, which means that for humans, n is 23 chromosomes. So in your body cells, you have 2 sets of chromosomes. Your total number is 46. In males, the special tissue in your testes is what's going to produce your gametes, your sperm, and to do that, meiosis has to happen. Okay? In other words, but through the process of meiosis, you halve the number of chromosomes. So in a human sperm cell, there'll be 23 chromosomes. N, the special word for that is haploid. But in the normal cells that your testes are made out of, if you're male, there's 46. So during the production of sperm, meiosis happens and the number of chromosomes is halved. Gametes have half the number of chromosomes. Exactly the same thing happens in females. So testes, your testicles, if you're a boy, yeah, normal set of chromosomes, exactly the same as ovaries in females, in girls, and eggs in your ovary are produced through the process of meiosis so that they have half a set of chromosomes. Okay? When a sperm and an egg join back together again, you end up with a full set of chromosomes. Okay, so this fetus, you get a sperm cell with 23 chromosomes in, fertilizing an egg cell with 23 chromosomes in, and producing a new set of chromosomes, 46. That's why it's important that we've got half the number of chromosomes in a father's sperm and half a set of chromosomes in a mother's egg. Okay, the only difference between males and females is when this process happens. So in females, this meiosis happens before you're born. All of your eggs are in your ovaries when you were born. They can't be fertilized until changes happen during puberty and your eggs start to develop every month and you get your period and you start your menstrual cycle. In boys, there's no sperm at all until you enter puberty, and then your testes start to work when you go through puberty and start to make sperm cells when you go through the changes that happen in puberty. Okay, so we could draw this same diagram for rabbits, cats, dogs, horses, cows. We could draw a similar diagram for pollen cells being made in anthers and egg cells being made in plants' ovule in their ovaries, the ovules being produced. Okay, sexual reproduction is the same. A male sex cell is formed by meiosis and gets half the normal number of chromosomes. An egg cell is formed in females by meiosis and gets half the number of chromosomes. From this diagram, we could say a haploid sperm and a haploid egg join together when the sperm meets the egg in the fallopian tube and make a diploid zygote or fetus. This is the point, and you can only get the sperm and the egg, or the pollen and the egg, through this process of cell division called meiosis.